Good morning and welcome to the WAVY Digital Desk. I'm your host, Sarah Good. If you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, please feel free to ask questions during this and interact. We already are live on both those streaming platforms and wavy.com, and there'll be an article on wavy.com following this with all the tips from our guest that's joining us today. And I want to go ahead and introduce her and bring her on, Dr. Kathleen Curtis, and she is with Greenbrier Family Medicine, which is a part of Centera Medical Group. So she's going to join this morning to talk about all those summer health tips to keep you and your family safe and your kids, throughout this time. And I know some people are still in school, some people are still waiting to, have that summer break. But as these temperatures go up, and we've been seeing that this week, it's a really important conversation to have. So I'm going to bring on Dr. Curtis now. Dr. Curtis, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Every year I'm sure you get these same questions either from parents or from people just going outside. Are there some top questions that you get each year that seem to repeat, as people sort of get, started on their summer holiday?
Absolutely. This time of year, we get tons of questions and many office visits for very common summer-related events. One of the most common questions we get is about heat-related illnesses and how to stay safe in these really high temperatures and high humidity that we get in the Hampton Roads area. And one thing I like to emphasize to all of our patients is to really try to stay cool. Dress appropriately for the weather. Dress in light colors and in loose layers. And it's very important to keep well hydrated. I can't stress hydration enough. We just tend to feel better when we're hydrated. We're able to stay cooler better. If you're feeling overheated, it's important to get out of the sun, to find some shade, or if possible, to get indoors where there's some air conditioning, just to cool off for a brief period of time.
And for those kiddos or for those people that might have difficulty sort of registering when's too hot, they're having fun playing or whatever the situation is there a general rule of thumb, in terms of how much liquid you need to drink during the day or how careful you might need to be, in intense heat getting inside?
So there's no really set amount of liquid that somebody needs to drink. We're all a little bit different in our fluid requirements, but it's just important to have a cool, non-caffeinated beverage, preferably water, handy, and to kind of be sipping and drinking throughout the day.
And I know that it must be a huge issue, at pools, especially I'm thinking busy pools, lifeguards, managing kids, you get overheated, kids are, maybe getting lethargic. Are there certain signs or symptoms, that kids show off or that adults even show off, if you're at the beach, if you're exercising, that you want to be aware of to know when to seek help?
So there's one common myth that is out there, and that is with heat exhaustion, that an individual will quit sweating. And actually, that's very false. Most folks in the heat are going to, initially have, normal moist skin and sweating as a way to cool. And the absence of sweating does not mean that somebody's not becoming overheated. Generally, folks will begin to feel warm, their cheeks will be flushed, and they may become a little bit irritable in the heat, particularly with children. So those are some signs to kind of look for. If you've been out in the heat and in the sun for many hours, it's just really good to take a period of time to get in the shade, get under that pool umbrella, have a snack, have a cool beverage. And if folks are not beginning to feel better after a little rest, then it might be time just to call it quits for the day.
And, in terms of being outside, we've all heard those certain hours, maybe you want to avoid that midday block, go inside, get some lunch, or just use it as a time to cool down. Does that sort of hold true?
It really does. Morning hours and late afternoon hours, the intensity of the sun is just a little bit less. And so we tend to tolerate it a little bit better. But between about, 11 and 3 p.m. in the afternoon, that's when our sun is the most intense. And we're going to feel that a little bit quicker.
And you worry too about, I know, sports camps and different things going on, across the summer. You're wearing heavy gear, maybe, you're not maybe taking a second, but is that where maybe water doesn't just do the trick? Is that electrolytes, Gatorade, getting things on besides maybe just straight water?
Water is perfectly fine, but
Okay.
yes, for the extreme athlete that's out there for many hours, say football practice, and they're out in a football camp all day long, Gatorade or an electrolyte balanced water is a little bit helpful, but we don't want to over rely on that. I think our local athletic departments at our public school system are very educated in this matter, and they tend to take a lot of precautions looking at heat indexes and weather reports and trying to gear those practices from being in those really high heat hours or taking frequent breaks. Now, if there's an athlete out there that is becoming overheated and there's some concern about that, the number one thing that we want to do is cool down that athlete. And so, taking off that extra gear that an athlete might be wearing during practice can really help cool the body, getting that fluid intake, preferably a cold beverage, and getting indoors where there's air conditioning. Very, very key points for anybody who's feeling the heat to that degree.
And another big issue, obviously, with heat related illness, sun related illness, is getting sunburns and certain skincare issues. And we've seen the worst of it with sun poisoning and things that can happen there, and also just more of the easy burn. Maybe some aloe will take care of. But can you talk a little bit about that spectrum, maybe, and sort of what you've seen?
Absolutely. So I think the first and foremost thing is prevention. So I think we've all heard about sunscreen. It's very important to be using sunscreen every time we're outdoors, particularly if we're going to be at the beach or the pool or anywhere for extended time. With sunscreen, you want to get a broad spectrum sunscreen, preferably one that covers both spectrums A and B, and that has a high SPF of at least 50. It's good to apply that sunscreen about 30 minutes before going outdoors. And one tip I like to give my patients is if you are using a spray sunscreen, you do want to apply it in advance of going into the water so that sunscreen has dried. So if you're using a spray and it's still moist on the skin, it can wash off fairly easily. Once you're in the sun, reapply. That's also very important. Mild sunburns is by far what we see the most often, and those will typically manifest within a few hours to 24 hours after being exposed. Unfortunately, once the burn is there, this damage is done, so to speak, and so we're really kind of mitigating the discomfort of it. And some easy things for sunburn is just to apply a hypoallergenic moisturizer to moisturize the skin and to use some cool compresses. Cool makes our burn skin feel more comfortable. It's not going to heal the burn any faster, but it's a comfort measure. And for folks that are really being bothered by the pain, we can use our common over the counter anti inflammatory type medications. They can give some relief. The more serious sunburns, that's when we're going to start to see blistering. Blistering will heal in about 7 to 10 days. That does indicate that it's a deeper burn, and we really should treat that skin very cautiously with some just gentle moisturizing and staying out of the sun until we heal.
And is there a point where, with that blistering, that you might need to actually seek other care besides just maybe home remedies? Is that maybe going to the doctor? Or, as long as, you're feeling okay, you're managing it okay, the pain tolerance that you can just sort of manage on your own?
Generally, this can be managed on your own, but if there is extensive blistering across large parts of the body, this is essentially a burn. And burns, particularly when blisters pop, you have open skin, there's increased risk of infection and increased risk or fluid loss. So if it's an extensive portion of the body, then absolutely make an appointment with your primary care provider so that we can be checking that skin and making sure that you're healing well.
And thanks for saying too, staying out of the sun with the sunburn, obviously you don't want to cause more damage. So we've seen people that first day of summer run out to the beach, maybe not be thinking about it as much. We've seen people get a sunburn. They're on the first day of vacation and they stay out the next, couple days. That can just cause even more damage, right? So is it bringing an umbrella to the beach, maybe putting a t-shirt on over? I mean, what are some things that people can do?
Absolutely. So you are correct. If you've already got a sunburn and you're going out repeatedly and getting burned over and over again, it's just causing more damage to the skin. So you can mitigate some of this by wearing some sun protective clothing. We have a lot of options available now, clothing specifically for folks that are outdoors that have SPF, or you can have a heavy t-shirt or a cover up. Umbrellas, some of the canopies that we see at the beach are also very helpful for filtering the sun. And of course, wearing a hat with a good brim to protect the face and the ears and the back of the neck. We see burns there quite frequently.
And if you do, I just want to reiterate, if you do have a spot maybe that lingers around for a little while, if you have something come up after summer, after maybe you've had some of that skin damage, is that the point where, go to your primary care or go see a dermatologist, go check that out?
Absolutely. Sun is the number one cause of skin cancers. So if there is a lesion that looks different, that has changed, that has become irritated, is bleeding, multiple colors, things that look different, make an appointment primarily with your primary care provider because they know what to look for.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is concern that there is a skin cancer present, then that primary care provider can help direct you in the best way towards a dermatologist.
And I want to move into something else that is in the water. We're so lucky to have a lot of wildlife here, but we also do get some wildlife that could cause, some potential pain. I'm thinking mostly jellyfish stings. And, it sort of comes out more when the water gets warmer. But those you do hear about, you hear about it in all of our waterways. What are some of the things that you've heard from patients or the tips that you recommend?
So jellyfish stings are really common. We are fortunate here in Hampton Roads that many of our jellyfish don't cause too many problems. The moon jellyfish in particular, we see most commonly on the beach. They tend not to cause as many stings, but yes, we have plenty of other jellyfish out there that can. A lot of times, patients don't really see the jellyfish. They're in the water. They feel a sudden sharp pain, they get out of the water and they're developing a rash on the arm or the leg, wherever that they were touched. So typically what someone would see is a bright red, linear, meaning in a line kind of formation, red mark, and it can be either blistery or more like hives. The important thing to do is to try to get those stingers off. So we recommend rinsing the area with seawater, just to kind of clean the area. And if you can see any visible stingers, to remove those right away. Um, there's been a lot of different remedies out there in social media and the internet on how to manage these stings. Um, Comfort is the primary thing that we direct patients towards. And there's been a fair amount of research out there looking at what really makes us most comfortable. And actually, hot as opposed to cold is more effective in reducing pain. So it's recommended, if you can, to go home and take a hot shower,
Mm.
and that will help relieve the skin. If that's not an immediate option, then applying like a cool pack or an ice pack is kind of a secondary measure. With certain stings, there have been some recommendations out there. There's one that's fairly common, and that is to apply shaving cream and then to use a side or edge of a credit card to scrape along the surface of the skin. The thought is that would dislodge any stingers that are still present, and that the shaving cream would kind of catch those and bind those up so other parts aren't getting stung. Very anecdotal, no real research to support it, but it is at least an interesting concept.
And it's
Not sure
things you
how
have
many
at
people have
home, I want to
shaving,
say.
who have shaving cream right at the beach.
Right.
Um, but there are a few others. Baking soda can help neutralize, and that has some small evidence that it is effective. And meat tenderizer that contains papain, which is a particular ingredient in some meat tenderizers, and that can be helpful. But meat tenderizers that don't contain that papain, that contain other ingredients, not so effective. Ammonia, alcohol, in terms of like rubbing alcohol. And one that I think is really amusing is urine. Does not work. So we do not recommend that.
I was going to say that's the wives' tale. And then I've also heard vinegar before. I've seen people actually bring it in their beach bags.
Yeah, it's not been shown to be effective.
Well, that's good to know. For anyone packing for the beach, you can leave your vinegar at home. Maybe bring a little bottle of shaving cream. But no, I mean, they're interesting, what people have tried out. Obviously, it's been a discomfort. So figuring out, but the stingers, I think, is the most interesting piece here, making sure that those are out. Seems like that could be the most harmful or the most painful.
Absolutely. And when those stingers get irritated from either pressure or rubbing on the skin, they can continue to release some venom into the skin. And so we don't really recommend rubbing the area or applying pressure directly to the area. You may be just releasing more poison.
And that makes me think too, for a lot of people outside, bee stings I feel like are particularly common around, playgrounds or certain places, obviously, where nests are. Are there similar functions to that? As obviously, as long as you're not allergic to it, just sort of managing pain, making sure the stinger's out.
Absolutely. With the bee stinger or wasp sting, removing the stinger. Once the stinger's out, it's not the same as a jellyfish. You don't have continued venom being released into the skin. It's removing the stinger and then comfort care. So a cool compress to that area is helpful. Spot use of some cortisone steroid type of first aid cream can be helpful. And if folks get particularly itchy from either a bee sting, wasp sting, or mosquito bites, flies are common at the beach and they bite. A non sedating antihistamine is very helpful as well, just to take down that swelling and itching. For individuals that get real bitten up and they have extensive bites over their body, we don't recommend large scale use of topical antihistamines like a Benadryl cream in that manner, because we do worry about that in conjunction with an oral antihistamine, maybe too much antihistamine, and folks can get toxic on that. So if it's more widespread, really sticking to the oral and just some local comfort care measures.
That's good to know too, because I think people have a tendency to sort of, rub the lotion on, and in those spots in particular, I am thinking of, maybe your legs or somewhere where those flies or mosquitoes can get you. So that's a great tip. I want to talk about one other thing that we do have around here, especially maybe in some more wooded areas, but ticks. And we've seen that sort of come up across, the country right now in conversation is, checking for ticks, being very careful. Is there a certain protocol, when you're outside maybe in these areas of making sure that you are safe and that they haven't attached to you?
Well, absolutely. When it comes to tick bites, again, prevention goes a long way. So, generally, if you're going to be out camping or hiking for an extended period of time or in that kind of woody, tall grass area, having the protective clothing really goes a long way. So, having longer pants, pants that are tucked into socks or boots to protect, at the ankles. These like to grab onto, our socks and kind of crawl up the leg, so to speak. Again, having a hat on the head to prevent any tick falling from a low hanging branch goes a long way. After being outside, yes, do a tick check. You want to know if you've got a tick on your body. So just kind of really looking head to toe for any bites that may be there. It's interesting, we hear a Lyme disease, but there's many tick-borne illnesses out there. Lyme disease in particular is really transmitted mostly by the deer tick and most contagious in the nymph stage of the tick lifestyle. And really, these are very small ticks. They're about the size of a poppy seed. And what can be very troubling is they're easy to overlook. So an individual may not actually find that tick right away. The risk of disease transmission goes up after they've been engorged, after they've been feeding. And that's when the ticks actually become larger in size and they're more easily to be seen. And so when we're looking at these ticks, we'll ask patients a number of questions. We do know that the longer the tick is embedded, the higher the risk is. And so we like to know if there's a particular time where they were exposed and how long they think that tick may have been embedded. If the tick has been embedded for, over 36 hours, and we, know that we're in an area that's endemic for Lyme disease, then we may want to go ahead and prophylactically treat for Lyme disease with antibiotics. So it is good to check with your primary care provider about what you need to do after a tick bite. If it is not a deer tick, if it's been embedded for a very short period of time or was just found crawling on the clothing, we're not so concerned about that, and we may hold off on treatment. Concern goes up, obviously, when symptoms start to be present. So, some of the early symptoms could be flu like illness, sudden fever, body aches, fatigue, sweats. And there is, of course, that classic rash of Lyme disease, which is commonly referred to as the bullseye rash, where you have a red spot, a clearing, a red ring. And this could be a single bullseye or it could be multiple, and it doesn't necessarily have to be where the tick bit. So we do say to watch out for those rashes. If you have any of these symptoms, Lyme disease and tick-borne illness can be very serious. So definitely check in with your primary care provider.
And in terms of removing the tick, I've heard so many stories about that. Is there a particular way, whether that's burning or sort of using tweezers, just to be careful that, nothing is left?
Yeah, I don't recommend the burning method. I think there's too much of a risk to actually burning yourself, right? So the most effective way is to use just a pair of tweezers to grasp that embedded tick as close to the skin surface as absolutely possible. You really want to try to grasp at the head, not just on the body of the tick, but you want to try to get that head, and you want to use a firm, steady, and slow retraction. And the tick will eventually kind of let go and release, and you'll be able to remove that tick much easier. If you grab the body and it's more of a forceful jerking motion, you may just decapitate the tick and have kind of some tick parts left embedded in the skin, and they're a little bit harder to get out. Of course, it can be done, but we want it to be as easy as possible.
Absolutely. I mean, I know it's a scary feeling, I'm sure, to have that and to see it on your skin or to see it on your kid's skin. But, great to know, just stay calm, maybe pull it out a little slower, and then, obviously go to your primary care doctor to figure that out. We're almost out of time, but I did want to ask the last thing, summer food safety. I know that there's barbecues, there's different things that are available in the summer, there's treats, but what are some of those tips to keep people safe this summer?
So, absolutely. And again, with everything we've talked about today, prevention goes a long way. We all want to enjoy those summer events. We want to have those barbecues and picnics at the beach, and go to different events, and it's great fun. But food handling and food preparation is really key. You really want to keep your food cool, particularly sandwiches and salads and snack foods that may contain dairy or mayonnaise. These are common ones that will get us in the summertime. Bring a cooler with ice, keep that food cool. If food has been out for more than an hour, it's a little bit risky to ingest it. And so we don't generally recommend that. So once food's been out, it really should go. Symptoms, it can vary depending on the bug that somebody picks up. Symptoms could onset within a couple hours. Symptoms could start up to 24 hours later. Primarily, we're talking about diarrhea and vomiting. So, mild illnesses are generally what we call self limited and can be managed at home with just being sure we keep hydrated by drinking lots of clear fluids and keeping up with that fluid loss. And then a very bland diet when the stomach starts to settle down until we're able to tolerate food better. When you really need to call your doctor is if the symptoms are persisting or you're not able to keep up with those fluids. Dehydration is the thing that we worry about most. So if more is coming out than is going in, check in with your primary care provider. Some IV fluids may be in order, and sometimes we can recommend other medications to kind of slow the process.
Absolutely. And I know that, when you're packing up to go to the beach, the pool, you're packing for camp, you're packing just for your own day. Cars are getting hotter, it's obviously it's warmer outside. Do you recommend, I mean, obviously, when you're going to the beach, make sure you're really packing that cooler cool and being cognizant of the items that you're bringing and sort of is that sort of the overall tip, making sure maybe you're not bringing as many of those dairy products, making sure you're bringing maybe some more dry or shelf state safe food.
Shelf-stable food is obviously much safer. Using plenty of ice and ice packs and discarding food that has been left out is key. But your packaged like small bags of chips and crackers and such, they're going to be much safer and less likely to give you illness.
Well, Dr. Curtis, thank you so much. I mean, those are really, I think, also so day to day for people, all these tips that you've offered us, this morning. I think this is probably what most people are going to go through, whether it's the food, the heat, making sure you're aware of your sun care. So I really appreciate all the time you spent with us this morning. Is there anything else, in terms of summer safety that you just like for people to remember as they're going out in their day?
Just remember prevention goes a long way. Think about where you're going and what you're doing for the day and just plan ahead. Make sure you have those cold drinks. Make sure you've got the sunscreen, that you got the hat to protect yourself from the sun. And that can just really prevent a lot of discomfort on the back end of your vacation or
Well, for
day.
anyone joining us today or joining us later and you're rewatching this, this is the first step to prevention here. I think, thank you, Dr. Curtis, for giving us these tips, being able to actually provide them to this community and to our viewers wherever you're watching from. But thank you again so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.